This is TWiT. We're talking about the Apple event on Tuesday, which, by the way, cost us a copyright strike on YouTube. Wow. I don't know yet how that's going to come out. For I think 12 years we've been streaming whenever Apple streams an event, or Google or Microsoft streams an event. We rebroadcast their stream with our commentary on top of it. It seems to me to be fair use because it's for use in commentary, so people can understand more than just watching the stream.
Basically free advertising for Apple as well.
Right. And I don't think Apple should mind. However, and I don't know if it's Apple or Google, but we got taken down during the stream.
Wow.
And we're still down. So TWiT Live is off right now because of that. Wow. We've appealed it, of course, and I do hope that we'll get back on TWiT Live. But we fortunately have other streamers, Mixer and Twitch, stream, other place you can watch. But so if you just, a little programming note, if you can't see it on YouTube Live right now, that's why. But we did watch it at 7 a.m. here because they were in Brooklyn. And
right, literally, I could throw a baseball up the hill.
Oh, did you go?
Right up there. No, I begged on the podcast. Apple, next time you do an event in Brooklyn, I could have done a city bike and been there in 2 minutes.
Oh. I'm just going to say, Brian, from my personal experience, begging does not help.
Yeah, I know.
I've been to an Apple event since 2009.
Yeah.
That's all right. I don't mind. In fact, I thought the best thing we could do is to stream it and comment on it. And I think that that's a valuable thing to do. But I'm sitting there. So first of all, we already knew everything they were going to say. There were no surprises. No. So all you're watching at this point is for little details and maybe trying to get at some flavor. It's basically Kremlinology for what's going on. What is Apple's positioning? Because that's what these events are most in. You could read a press release that gives you the specs, the prices, the availability, and you'd be done. But what you're watching, at least what I'm watching on stage very carefully, is the nuance of what Apple's saying. They started by talking about Macs, which first was as a Mac fan, was very gratifying. I thought, hallelujah, a little Mac love. They announced a new MacBook Air with, frankly, an anemic processor.
Yeah,
but
very poor spec.
Very poorly spec'd and very inexpensive, $1199. We were hoping it would be sub 1,000. It's not. They do have a sub 1,000 MacBook Air. It's the old one. And then they announced a Mac Mini, which with lots of ports. We bought both. We're gonna use that Mac Mini.
Also more expensive.
Well, $100 more than the base model last time, which was, let's face it, 4 years ago. Last time, I think the dollar was worth less. But nevertheless. Then they go to the iPads, and suddenly everything's shiny, bright, new, faster. Yeah. And I realized if you had started with the iPads and went to the Macs, it would have been like, oh man, how depressing is this?
But also, it's the essential message they're pushing, which for me was, you will buy an iPad whether you like it or not, and we're going to price and spec our systems to do it.
It felt very much to me like the end of the line on the Apple II. Yeah, you remember that probably, Mike, where they had a conference. Apple had a conference in San Francisco. Apple II Forever. They had a song, Apple II Forever, and they killed it like 6 months later. and it was very clear to me that this is basically the end of the line for Mac OS.
They emphasized we're giving them what they want. Some people, for some reason, like our laptops, so we
don't get it. We don't know why.
Yeah, and for some reason they like the Mac Mini, so here's another Mac Mini. But now let's talk about the future of computing, the iPad. And it was really clear.
With the A12X Bionic, which is faster than the MacBook Pro.
I predict that after all the benchmarking is done, the fastest computer that Apple makes is going to be the new iPad.
Yeah, I can quite.
Well, and the graphics too. Like people a guy I know that hasn't had an iPad since like the second iPad. It was the graphics performance that he's like, all right, I'm getting one.
Yeah, they're doing an 8-core CPU, a 7-core GPU. They even have a machine learning core, dedicated machine learning core. It's so. It seems to me that all of the real innovation that's happening at Apple is happening in those chipsets.
When I saw that the new Apple Pencil magnetically sticks to the iPad, they're copying the Pixel Book, and then they're like, and then it charges through the. I'm like, really?
Yeah, that was
Pixel Book's pencil or pen or whatever you call it has a quadruple A battery. Did you know this existed?
I didn't until I got one of them. Yeah.
What's that? The size of a baby's pinky?
It's tiny. Yes,
baby's
something.
what?
Pinky.
Yeah, something.
Oh, come on.
It's very small.
Yes.
I have standards. Not many, admittedly, but
so wasn't just me, because I love Mac OS and I want to keep using Mac OS. Apple also had AutoCAD on stage, and they said very clearly this has the desktop AutoCAD engine in it. At Adobe's conference a couple of weeks ago, they announced Adobe Photoshop, basically all the features of desktop on the iPad.
But this comes back to what Mike was saying earlier. They want iOS because it's a nice little walled garden that they control absolutely and completely and can monetize that, whereas macOS is messy, other people playing it. And, for all the talk...
Well, furthermore, they're also beholden to Intel, right?
Yeah.
One of the reasons that Apple's Macintosh line has been held back is that Intel is stymied. Can't seem to do a 10-nanometer chip. Apple was very clear. We've got the first 7-nanometer chip in production, the A12X on it.
Yeah.
I feel like Apple would love to get out from under Intel.
Yeah.
Even for the Macs.
Well, Intel's got massive problems at the moment. Their work on 10 nanometer is completely stalled. Cobalt, which they were trying out as a method of getting around it, hasn't worked. At the same time, other chip companies are eating their breakfast, and they've got major supply problems on the server side because they've got 99% of the market, and people are still buying those chips, and they can't produce them fast enough. So, plus, they've lost their CEO in rather unusual circumstances. So, yeah, Intel just seems to be flailing at the moment. I don't blame Apple for trying to dump them.
The other thing is that they're grappling with a new generation of people who, like you were saying earlier, only want to use their phones. They grew up with touch devices. They only remember touch devices. There are lots of kids these days who never used a mouse before. They think it's kind of a weird contraption from the Victorian era or something like that. And let's face it, this is how change really happens: is old people die and young people are born, and they basically they're thinking, okay, in 20 years or 10 years, how are we going to get today's iPhone, 20-year-old iPhone users to buy a really expensive second computer for their desk? And it's got to be something that's going to be iPhone-like. Otherwise they're not going to buy it. That's obviously
are people going to do that, or are they just going to have the phone?
I think
more and more we're seeing things like Microsoft's continuity, Intel's I can't remember what they call it, not Samsung's little device where the phone becomes a desktop.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is a wonderful model.
Yeah, which HP
foldables
tried to do with Windows Mobile, but unfortunately died on its backside because
that was
Windows Mobile was terrible.
Yeah. Augmented reality is going to be a big thing that people use while they're sitting at a desk, I think.
So the screen will be virtual. It'll be imaginary, be projected on your eyeballs instead of sitting in front of it.
That's part of it. I do think there's a future for giant iPad-like devices, and for
the Surface Studio will be an iPad someday.
Exactly. And I think also there'll be things like office windows will be TVs like that one, giant screens that can be, so I think there are going to be screens everywhere, on your face, on the wall, on the desktop surface will be a screen. But, this whole touch, it's all going to be iOS-like. It's all going to be touch gestures and that sort of thing.
So, but Apple has a couple of issues. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say that's fine and great, but there could be a fairly long interim here before that reality comes. Yes. So the question is, and this has been debated, I'm not the first one to bring this up, but at what point do they risk? Apple's always been the company of creatives and high-end professionals. It's the thing that kept Apple alive as a company in the late 90s. What's the tipping point where those people have to go away and go to someone else? And also, what is the tipping point where Apple is fine with that?
Well, Brian, wasn't that the point of the event? The point is,
that's what I'm saying.
Let's see what's in the making. It was about creativity. It was a Brooklyn Academy of Music and the Opera House. It was you create with an iPad.